Good afternoon. I'm Paul Mullen, and welcome to WCBC's Candidate Forum for those seeking election to the Allegany County Board of Education. There are a total of 8 names on the ballot for Allegany County Board of Education. I'm pleased to report they're all here. Thank you. Our goal tonight is to let you know more about each of our candidates. While we aim to be fair, our overriding mission is for each of the candidates to be able to communicate their positions on the key issues facing education in Allegany County. With that in mind, each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer each of the questions. If a candidate who has already answered is challenged by another candidate as to his or her answer, he or she will be given a 30-second rebuttal. You can just raise your hand while the answer is going on to give me an indication that you need to say something. WCBC General Manager Mary Kleitz will be taking care of timing duties. She will show a red card with 30 seconds to go and ring the bell at the end of time. We will let you finish up a sentence, but we won't let you finish up a paragraph. Our panelists tonight: WCBC News Director Brian Gowans, Greg Larry from the Cumberland Times-News, Kathy Getty from First United Bank, and former school board member Jeff Metz. Later in our forum, I have one-on-one questions for each of our candidates. Now, with our first question, here's WCBC's Brian Gowans. Brian?
Thank you, Paul. It's well known that, and they have campaigned as such, that candidates Bond, Farrell, and Foote are running as a quote-unquote alliance. Can I get each of the candidates to comment on that? There has been some controversy about that.
And we are going to start in alphabetical order, and as fate would have it, the 3 in the alliance are the first to answer the question. And let's go to David Bond first. David?
So, in answering that, I mean, everybody has been saying that we're an alliance, and in a sense we are, but really what we are 3 conservative voters, 3 conservative men that have kind of met together at the beginning of this whole adventure that seems like it's been going on forever now, and our goal was not to vote as a block, as some people have said, but to put a conservative tilt, as I've said, onto the direction of education in this county, which really over the last 8 years has been heavily tilted in a liberal direction. So even though the board is not partisan, it depends on what the voters want. If the voters want a conservative tilt, then this is your choice on the end, the Bond, Foote, and Farrell thing. But as far as saying that we're an alliance, I see no difference with us than this. This is an alliance of Deb Frank, Nick Hadley, and Carmen Jackson. And these 3 candidates are all endorsed by the Teachers Union or the Teachers Association or the Education Association, which also endorsed Ben Jealous. So if you're kind of on the Hogan side and you want conservative type of stuff, then we're your guys. And if you're more of a Ben Jealous thing, these 3 will vote as an alliance for what the Teachers Association or the Teachers Union wants. So that's your choice. It's really comes down to what direction you want education to go. And really, it's as simple as that.
Bob Farrell?
I'd like to go back to the 2016 election. In the 2016 election, just previous to voting day, the current board at that time published people that they endorsed in the Times-News. With pictures of them in the Board of Education conference room and in front of the Board of Education property in front of the sign. Both of those candidates did not win election. My wife did win election in that cycle, but I guess it goes back to me is, number one, they have a policy that says we do not do political stuff on school board property, and they clearly violated their own policy doing that. And they also, in my opinion, violated the Open Meetings Act because they had more than a quorum, and they were discussing Board of Education, what was going to happen with the Board of Education. So back to the question about us as being an alliance, I don't see it being any different than what was going on then with the current board. They were trying to say who gets in and who doesn't get in. And we're not an alliance. We just like to work together. We like each other's views on different things. We're not like-minded. We're not in lockstep. We just like working together.
Wayne Foote.
I don't know if I'm on the bottom of the totem pole or the top of the totem pole, but I'm my own man, and I vote the way I want to vote. I am coming from the teacher segment of education. After all, I spent 42 years in the classroom. Also soccer coach, advisor to anything you could think about. Also serving on middle Atlantic state evaluation teams for accreditation for high schools up and down the Atlantic coast. The three of us kind of get together because we have the same concerns. They're conservative. If you look at a piece of pie and you divide it into thirds, three main components of education are, number one, education, that's me. A second third would be security, that would be Bob being retired from state police service. And the last third of that piece of pie would be business. And David has been in a successful business for over 30 plus years. So you look at those three items, you're looking at three main components of what's going on. I'm serving the end of my first term on the school board. I've enjoyed it very much. It's been an uphill battle. Talk about alliances, I feel like maybe I've been dealing with one for the last 4 years. Thank you.
Deborah Frank.
Thanks. I'm finding the answers I've heard a little shocking to this point. A couple issues, one being this is a nonpartisan race, and to attempt to make it a partisan race, I find that very disturbing. Secondly, I'm going to dispel one of the falsehoods that I'm sure will come out all evening long, and that is that I'm part of an alliance. The Allegheny County Education Association opted to, as they have in many years past, endorse three candidates. They happen to make a flyer with the three of us on it. I would love to serve with Nick and Carmen, but I have seen them as much as these three have seen them. We are not an alliance. I've not put out videos saying we're not really alliance, but vote for the three of us because 3 against 2 will get work done. That is clearly what an alliance is. So I find that very frustrating. When I filed to run in February, I've been a solo act and have continued to be that. And making this, again, a partisan race, I think is ridiculous. The best ideas and solutions for the school board will come from 5 independent thinkers, and these 3 have offered that they will not do that. They are going to vote as a block. Thanks.
Nicholas Hadley.
Well, I think the question was whether we believe that there is an alliance, and I think that signs and videos and everything that's been put out there is a concrete evidence that there is an alliance that with those 3 of Bond, Foote, and Farrell. I don't think we can hide that. I don't think they're trying to hide that. As far as the 3 of us, we actually were endorsed by the ACEA. They picked 4 of the most qualified that they thought that had the views of the students first, and then the teachers in mind. And unfortunately, one of those did not make it through the primary, but we did. Like Deb said, I have not seen anyone here outside of here to get together to think about anything, to brainstorm about anything, or be any alliance. And 2 years ago, I was in the election in 2016, and I was one of those ones that didn't make it. So, Mr. Foote referenced 4 years. I wasn't even there last year, so I couldn't be considered an alliance with any of the other ones that are on there right now. So I'm an independent thinker. I'm all about the students. I'm certainly not going to make it about my views or anything else. And I do think I'm pretty conservative myself. So I wouldn't think that I sit on the liberal side. So no alliance here, nor would I ever think that there would be one with me. So independent thinker, and what's best for the students is what I'm all about.
Carmen Jackson.
Good evening. I would like to know, what is a conservative?
There we go.
I would like to know, what is a conservative person to do on the school board that's different from any other person? I have not met to date one parent or student that I have talked to that didn't say they wanted safety in our schools. There's nothing liberal or conservative about that. And that's where we have to start our conversations is we all want our schools safe. We all want the bullying to stop. We all want more programming, better funding. So I don't know how you make that liberal or conservative. The question is, how do we get there? And we need board members that are willing to work with each other, regardless of their political persuasions, and fix the problems. Our students, when I see a student, a kid of any age, I don't first think, oh, are they conservative? I need to know that before I can help them. That's ludicrous. And I'd just like to say, I have no alliance with anyone. I just want to work with people who want to fix the problems regardless of the labels. We cannot bring these labels into our school system.
Terry Lynn Casey Camp.
Good evening, citizens of Allegheny County. I'm clearly not part of an alliance, and I would actually like to just take a moment to thank all those that voted for me in the primaries, because I was not actively engaged in campaigning because I was battling cancer, so I'm clearly not associated with any type of alliance. In terms of how I feel about the alliance, I am concerned that they are identifying themselves affiliated with a particular political affiliation, and also that they are thinking that they'll vote as a block. And I think that a board needs to be a diverse membership with relevant expertise, and that is really committed to working ethically within the parameters of local, state, and federal regulations, and that will basically be committed to generating viable solutions to complex problems that are neither liberal or conservative. We have to focus on what's in the best interest of our children. Obviously, that is our primary goal. And as other candidates have already said, that all these issues are really not conservative-based or liberal-based.
Jim Snake Robertson.
I guess from the beginning, the perception that I have is with the alliance, so to speak, was a little disturbing to me in the fact that with three individuals, even though it has been stated that they come from three different walks of life, with only 5 people on the school board, and for 3 to think alike, do alike, or whatever, means that basically we don't need the other 2, because 3 out of 5 will rule any rule or regulation that may be brought before the Board of Education. I myself have been not a loner, but for most of the people in the citizens of Allegheny County know me, I speak my own truths. I don't shoot bullets for other people. And when it comes time for the kids in this county for the past 18 years, I think that my record pretty much proves for itself what I've done and what I've been able to do with the kids, the students, the teachers, the whole 9 yards in the school system here in Allegheny County. And I'm proud of that. And that has not been talked about, that has not been put down or whatever, because it's the truth. I don't make promises because I can't see into the future. But I can tell you, if you look at my past experience for the past 18 years, you will see that I have dedicated a lot of time and effort, along with a lot of other businesses and educational people, to give these students the best awareness of what they can have for either college or skill areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim, I think the last time around you told us that on the ballot you're going to be known as Jim Snake Robertson officially. Okay, I just wanted to... I wanted to point that out and remember that as well. How we're going to go in order, we're going to reverse the order this time around and then kind of jump around a little bit so you're not following the same person each time. And that gives you a little bit more chance to be a little bit creative in your answers. With our next question from the Cumberland Times News reporter, Greg Larry. Greg?
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. My question is on the Chinese Immersion program. The program is at Westside Elementary School and is expanded to Braddock Middle School this year. It's with the language and culture of China, teaching that to the students. Do you favor this program? Would you like to continue it? Would you vote to continue the Chinese Immersion program?
Sneg Robertson?
Absolutely. I think part of this program, and I've been able to experience that by visiting the schools, is that we finally started stepping out of the box in some of the counties and the school systems to give education to the kids over and above the basic classes that they may have to take. I think it's been well received. I think the parents are involved in it, actually learning the language also. I think when it gets to the point that the students are asking for it, that's what it's all about. It's creativity. It's very diverse. And the best part about it is it works. And that's the key to anything in the school system, is that it works. Thank you.
Next will be Terry Lynn Casey-Camp, and if you're wondering about the spelling, and we were this evening a little bit, it's Kasecamp. Terry?
Okay, thank you. I am definitely for the Chinese immersion program. I think anything that we do in order to enhance cultural diversity is a plus for our community, number one. But beyond that, the Mandarin language itself is actually one of the most challenging or difficult languages to actually learn. It actually improves memory, critical thinking, and enhances the ability to learn multiple languages. I actually believe that we should be teaching a second language in elementary school from the get-go, that we're kind of behind the times in not doing that. And children actually can learn language at an earlier age. We have what's called a critical period of language development that is prior to adolescence. So the fact that we don't actually introduce language to most of our children until their adolescence is basically a fault that we have with our school system. And I would actually like to see more programs teaching other languages throughout elementary schools and middle schools. Thank you.
Carmen Jackson.
Yes, I wholeheartedly endorse the Chinese Emergence Program. I think our students can only benefit from getting culturally aware of different cultures, and I'd like to see them do more language studies in the schools. They will be able to take that information they're learning now, and we don't know where they can end up. I have a nephew, my godson, born and raised in Frostburg before the Chinese Emergence Program was in our schools, and he went to China and taught English and immersed himself in that culture. Now, just think if one of our kids who have learned the culture went to China and what all they could learn and do, and especially with money. You know, we need to learn how to negotiate with different countries and different cultures, how to invest in different cultures, and so they're going to leave with a wealth of information. They can end up working, you know, in our government in high levels and, you know, do different language barriers. There's just a lot that they can do to grow from this and teach others how to accept other people's cultures. Because learning to accept one another, whether it's here or abroad, is the most fundamental thing we can learn at this point in our life. Because right now we're learning a lot of divisive behavior.
Nick Hadley.
Well, the Chinese Immersion program is one of the best programs that we have here in Allegany County. It started out where some may have thought, well, this is something that's not going to work out, or I can't believe this is in Allegany County, or kind of thought this isn't something that we need here. I mean, why would we need to learn Chinese? But I'm going to tell you what, those students that are in that program, they are learning leaps and bounds, because they're not only talking about, talking in Chinese, but they're also learning their, regular studies throughout this time frame. frame. It's not just focusing on Chinese, but it's an amazing program. And I have seen them put on an actual full program from beginning to end where they sing and they dance and they speak and they have different parts. And it's just amazing to see how excited they are. And as some others have said here, this is something that is going to propel our kids above and beyond a lot of other places, because they're already going into the marketplace being able to speak a different language that's kind of a global language that can help out all the way around. So it's something that the only problem that I see is we don't have enough classrooms full of this. It would be great if we had enough money to put it through all of the elementary schools and carry it on through. But it is a fantastic program. I will continue to support it, and I will continue to do everything that I possibly can to expand it. Thank you very much.
Deb Frank.
Thank you. Oops, am I supposed to do this one? Sorry. From the beginning of the campaign, I have 1,000% been behind any innovative programming in this county that allows our students to be global competitors. It allows them to develop, as some of my predecessors have just mentioned, critical thinking skills, and to start building that in the elementary school level is wonderful. When the Chinese Immersion program began, it was grant funded. At this point, with the amount of students that are in, I think we're at 120 now. By the time the students who began in the program a few years ago reach high school, we will have over 400 students in this program. Again, beyond all the pluses that everybody else has mentioned, it's been one of those programs that in essence is a wash in terms of the financial contribution of the school system. Were it not for the Chinese teachers here, we would be paying other elementary teachers salaries. So if you compare the cost of living expenses for the teachers and the teachers' assistants, it in essence is a wash. So complaints that I hear from people about we can't afford this is just ridiculous. We've got to be more innovative. From day one, I've said that, and to look at programs like this that are thriving in an area like Cumberland, which is very culturally undiverse, and allow us to look at other metropolitan cities that don't have anywhere near programming like this. We should really count that as a feather in our cap and a real plus for the students in this county.
Wayne Foote.
Being an art teacher, I am all for any kind of a program that looks into the arts, and the Chinese have a great background in the arts. I'm not opposed to this program, but I'm looking at the point that if you get on some websites and you see where this type of program is connected to the Confucius Institutes, which serves as a vehicle for Chinese propaganda. I'm just concerned about that a little bit. If there's anything related to that should be looked at in a little bit more depth. And when our U.S. government comes out and stipulates that they do not want to have any of these programs at the university level, I think that is speaking to some degree about this program. So I'm all for it, but I would like to look into it, investigate it a little bit more. Thank you.
Bob Farrell.
I agree with Wayne. I've tried to find out after the Chamber of Commerce Forum exactly where the funding came for this program. I did find out that some of it is local and some of it apparently is from the Confucius Institute. I don't know very much about that. I'm still researching it, but I am for the program. I'm for if we can expand the program, if it's good for kids and everybody agrees, then certainly, expand the program and make it better. I'm also for, an ag program. We don't have an ag program in Allegheny County, and we're the only county that doesn't have it. There's a lot of things we need to do and a lot of things that need to be improved and work a little better together. So, I'm not against the program. I would like to know a little bit more about it before, and I'd like to hear from the parents on it. I'd like for the parents that are involved or the parents not involved to give us a little more information so we know how they feel about it. And I think at any time you do anything like that and have the children's mind expand more is a good deal. Thank you.
David Vaughn.
Well, as I said from the beginning, I mean, I'm all for languages. One of my daughters teaches in Spain, and that was her major in college. She teaches Spanish, or she teaches English to Spanish children in Spain. That's where she lives. But I had a concern from the beginning. I said my concern was how are we paying for this, and I didn't know how we were. So it turns out that somebody actually posted the answer to me, and then I started to do some research. What I was told was that my view of finding funding was not relevant because it was paid 100% by the Confucius Institute. I had never heard that term. I don't know if any of you have heard that term, or anybody listening has heard that term. But I strongly suggest you get on the internet and you search Confucius Institute and something like funding or propaganda, or just search it. Because it turns out that this is definitely funded by the Confucius Institute. They spend $10 billion a year funding their programs. They supply the teacher, the materials, the textbook, the curriculum. So that program is taught by a teacher who, we get a slate, from what I've read from my research, we get a slate of choices of several teachers who are handpicked by 12 members of the Hanban Agency, which is a division of the Chinese Ministry of Education and Propaganda. They then pick those teachers, and it has become a soft power arm of the Chinese government. So several universities just in the last several months, University of Chicago, Penn State, Cornell declined it, Texas A&M, our second biggest university in the country, have all done away with their Confucius Institute programs. So I think we need to look into that.
All right, thank you. Before we take a break, a quick question and kind of a poll. If you want to give a one-line answer, that would be good. I'll give you 2 lines if you need it. Is an endorsement good or bad, in your opinion? And we'll start up with David Bond and just go down the line very quickly.
I think an endorsement depends upon who you are as a voter. I personally trust the voters to make a decision, and I could give a whole speech about that endorsement process of the teachers, but I won't. Maybe later.
Bob Farrell?
I'm not endorsed by anybody. I'm all by myself.
Wayne Foote?
I look at my track record of being a teacher of 36 years in this county, 10 years at this institution, this college. My name is well known. They know that I'm a square shooter. Okay. And with that, I pass it on.
Very good. Deb Frank?
That's a difficult question because I am thankful for the endorsements I've received, but I have not sought endorsements. So that's a mixed bag question. I think when you say, well, you know, any endorsement's bad or I'll leave it to the voters, you're negating the influence that some of these organizations have.
Okay. Nick Hadley?
Well, I kind of agree there. I think it depends on who you're being endorsed by, and I think when it comes down to the ACEA, I'm proud to be endorsed by them very simply because they're in the schools, they know what's going on, and you know, it shows that I'm doing a decent job. So I think it depends on who you're being endorsed by, Paul.
Okay. Carmen Jackson.
Yes, endorsements can be great depending on, as everyone else has said, depending on who endorses you. But also, we have to look at, does that mean they're giving you money and pulling strings for you? So you have to be able to be endorsed by people where you can remain independent in your thinking and your actions. And that's part of the evaluation process. I don't want money from people who want to control me.
Okay. Terry Lynn Casey-Camp.
I would have to agree that it is a question that could be good or bad, and having an endorsement, and obviously you don't want to be influenced in terms of how you vote. So I really don't have anything additional to add to what everybody has said.
Snake Robertson.
I have no endorsements, nor have I accepted any money from anybody in regards to me running for the Board of Education. Thank you.
Are they good or bad?
It's a play on words on this situation. You know, I can't say yes or no because I'm on my own. I didn't ask for any endorsements. Did I attend? Yes, I did attend the teachers' forum, but I was not selected as one of their recommendations.
Okay, very good. We're going to take a break now. We have a 30-second rebuttal. Let's go down to the end of the table. David Bond. David?
I just want to say that at the teacher interview, I did attend, as Snake said he did. I was the last one to be interviewed. There were 6 questions on the paper. I was asked 3. I did not have one follow-up question, and there weren't any follow-up questions to anything I said, or I didn't even get to finish the 6. And Deb Franks and Carmen Jackson's material was already on the table when I walked into the room, and they had not supposedly announced their picks yet. So that's why I'm a little shaded on the whole endorsement process.
Deb, Carmen, want to say anything?
I'm getting tired of being thrown under the bus for any affiliation with the ACEA. They chose to endorse me. I went just as you did. I was interviewed by them. I'm tired of your publicity or your videos that say because they endorse me, I'm voting for Ben Jealous. This has just gotten crazy. I went and got interviewed just as you did. I don't know what happened behind the scenes. I don't know any of those people. I don't know. I did not. I had probably 3 questions. It was about a 7-minute interview.
Okay. Carmen?
The fact that our material was on the table probably does not mean that they had already made a decision. It just means we had already interviewed. There is no reason to make assumptions about how they chose us. But I'm sure we were chosen because we filled out an application, we showed up and answered the questions, we left material, and we left. Some were chosen and some were not, and I cannot answer for how those decisions were made. But you can't use that to make us an alliance that you tried to join.
Okay, we're going to take a break. This portion is not brought to you by the Political Action Committee of the Society of Uninformed Voters. They would not have anything to do with us. But you do, and we thank you for listening tonight, and we thank our candidates for being here, and we'll be back on WCBC after this. Usually the commercial breaks are about 3 minutes long, so you can get out and stretch or whatever you need to do. And we are back here at Allegheny College of Maryland in the Continuing Education Building at ACM. We appreciate our cooperation not only from Allegheny College of Maryland, but also our partners tonight at Allegheny Media, who are providing the video on our Facebook page and also on a YouTube page. So we have you covered in a lot of ways. With our next question here this evening is Kathy Getty from First United Bank. Kathy?
Opioid epidemic has impacted the school system on every level, ranging from kids involved with drugs to parents who are addicted and no longer properly caring for their kids. How much can the school system do to address some of the issues created by this crisis?
We're going to start with David Bond, and what we'll do this time around is go every other person and then come back every other person that way, so we don't follow the same pattern. Keep it interesting. David?
Well, I mean, this is definitely a big problem for our community, and it's one that should concern us all. And the solution isn't going to be an easy one. So I think the school system needs to look into bringing, and I've said this before, we need to bring in more like social workers. We probably need several. I couldn't tell you, that's a question for a specialist. But we should have a core of social workers or counselors to help deal with students who have these kind of problems that related to the epidemic, whether they be related to studying, attention. There's a lot of things that are going to affect the student and their ability to perform well in our schools because of their home environment. So we can't fix the home environment by giving more homework or by changing our tests. That's only going to be changed by helping the student deal with a home situation, and that's probably going to take, like I said, social workers or counselors. So maybe we can work more with the health department. That's one thing. We're definitely going to have to get along and work more with our sheriff's department and other local law enforcement, not just the activities of a resource officer, although a resource officer could be used for that purpose as well, to help with drug education and things in the school. But it's not just going to be an education thing. I really believe it's going to have a mental health component that's going to have to be added. And we're going to have to look at how we're going to fund that so that we can work that into our budget.
Wayne Foote.
Definitely, it is a problem within our schools. Kind of agree with David. I think everyone at this table would agree that we need more guidance programs in our schools to cope with this. Also, having been a teacher in the past, you have to have communication within your building. If teachers are not going to communicate with their administration because there's pet peeves going on and they're not working as a team, then the work in the trenches where all the work takes place, the teacher sees what's going on. They can refer to administrators, but if you don't have a good working relationship, that doesn't help. That's why myself being supportive of teachers would encourage for teamwork to happen. And also, I go back to the dollar bill and what we have to work with in Allegheny County. It is stretched so far that we can't cover all the bases, but this is a major thing that needs to be addressed. So I would almost believe everyone at this table would say, yes, we need that as one of our top priorities. Thank you.
Nick Hadley.
Well, like everyone else has said so far, this is a huge issue, and it's something that's so sad because it's our students that are impacted most, whether it be a parent that they see or a grandparent or it's them themselves. And I think that it's going to take collaboration between the health department, the hospital, and the individual doctor's offices that would be able to help out. I don't know if it would go into the fact of psychiatrists or more mental health people, but it's really going to have to be something that we collaborate with everyone in this community because it impacts so many. And it's not just going to be a member, 5-member board that's going to be able to make that happen, but it's going to be how we can outsource, how we can bring in, as David said, social workers or mental health experts, or, as I said in a prior forum that, we might have to train our guidance counselors so that, they probably get bombarded with these issues all the time, and we need to, not just rely on them, but they're the first point of impact probably in the schools that have to deal with this, and we need to make sure that they are, doing what they need to do and that they have the training for that. So it's just going to be a collaborative effort to take care of our students in our county for this epidemic. Thank you.
Terry Lynn Casey Camp is next.
I believe that this is a problem that we have to have a multifaceted response to the opioid epidemic, to include, first of all, recognizing that our students, our staff, and faculty have all probably been directly affected or even lost a loved one. And so we want to make sure that we're providing adequate support within the school system for our students and our teachers. I also believe that ACPS has to be a resource to educate about the dangers of using drugs, and we've been doing that, but to continue to do that and work with community mental health agencies and forge partnerships with agencies like the Allegheny County Health Department, programs like Prescribe Change, which has been in effect for the last, I think, 3 or 4 years. We also have to recognize that children are actually starting life addicted to drugs in utero, and so that creates all types of developmental delays with children, and we need to make sure that we're addressing those issues, as well as a prevention in terms of beginning to teach more effective coping skills starting in elementary school in order to help prevent. I think prevention is key here, and starting with elementary school students.
Okay, we'll go up to Bob Farrell now.
Kind of confused me, Paul, jumping around like that.
I confuse myself sometimes. Go ahead, Bob.
I come from a diverse background because I was with the state police where I dealt with drugs. Then I was in the teacher in the high school in Allegheny County where I, encountered it again, and then in charge of safety and security for the board where I sat through the hearings where kids were involved. I agree with everybody. I think everybody up here is going to agree that we need a multi-pronged effect. We also need to think a little bit outside the box. First time I was teaching, at the Career Center, and I had a child asked him why he couldn't get his homework done, and he told me, "You don't understand, Mr. Farrell. I'm the designated driver." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And he said, "I drive my mom around to the bars at nighttime so she drinks." I said, "Well, where are you?" And he said, "I sit in the car while she does that." And I think that we have to realize that these kids are living in a different age and a different time, and they're going home to a different environment than we ever experienced, sitting here. I agree. We need more counselors. We need more social workers. We definitely want to have resource officers in every school. I propose that. I intend to do it. If I'm elected, I want them in every school as fast as we can get them there. One of the gentlemen that I hired before I left the board, named Timmy Stephens, works down Georges Creek, and I think you'll see that he mentors the kids down there. He has a group of kids that he takes to lunch, and he does all kinds of things with them, and that's a positive influence for them. And I think that's one of the big things we need to do to make it better.
Thank you. Deb Frank?
I would certainly agree with what everybody else has said. It's a crisis not just here, but it's a pandemic across this country. I would venture to say that our issue is more family impact of opioid addiction, more so than our students being addicted. I'm certainly not blind to the fact that that's a problem. But I think, as everybody else was saying, having a multifaceted, proactive approach to tackling this. I know the health department was mentioned. Our college is working on a very sizable federal grant to expand counseling services to high poverty areas, of which Allegheny County is one of those areas. I think building those partnerships is critical, but also, I think we need to take note of the fact that we have some elementary teachers who on their own have initiated some very helpful programs at that level with students, teaching them stress reduction, coping skills. For many of these kids, our first sign, and I even see it at my level of the college, the first sign is homework not getting done and not getting to school often or on time. And it's all dependent upon their family support. So we need to obviously increase the social work, the mental health counselors and so on, but really tackle this at that early stage, as Terry was mentioning, and building partnerships all through our county.
Carmen Jackson.
Thank you. Well, this goes right back to the first question that was asked about being conservative or liberal. There is no one, conservative or liberal, who does not want an answer to this problem. And that's why we've got to get away from this labeling in order to function. But opioids and bullying are both a major problem in our community. It's not just a school problem. It's not just a home problem. It's a problem in every category of life, whether you started at home or whether it was sold to you on the playground. We have to work together. The solution will come when the parents, the teachers, the administrators, the students all work together collaboratively. And we have to learn to work with each other and our social skills, and so we can better identify what's going on. Now, I've been the chairperson of the Allegany, Garrett County's Foster Care Citizens Review Board for 40 years. And in that position, I've worked with identifying the needs of special needs students. There's a lot of programs in this area that we can learn to tap into by working together.
Snake Robertson.
What can be done? It seems in the past that the problem exists mostly maybe from home, the people you hang around with. Does it take somebody now to bring the Social Security Administration into it, the Sheriff's Department, drug testing? You know, it's a low poverty area for some people, and if that's their relaxation or whatever it may be, it's not a good thing for the community. We always seem to try to build a bridge around every problem that we have to get to it, instead of maybe we just all, including, like I said, the Social Security Administration, Sheriff's Department, all law enforcement, as well as even coming up where the parents of the students may have to attend, you know, a 3-hour seminar once a year, every 6 months to get to it. We can't continue to throw money at something and not getting a result that seems to be working. And what I mean by working is that we're showing a positive aspect for it. So my suggestion is that we have to go through the whole county and get people. If you're going to get a help, you're going to have to be drug tested. I was drug tested for 45 years for my job. And if you're going to get funds free of charge and you may fall into that category, then possibly you're going to have to say you need to be drug tested too. So you have to do something more positive, and that's my point about it. It has to start lower down.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Jeff Metz, who is a former member of the Board of Education. As we were doing the run-up to this evening, we had heard rumors that Jeff was advising a group that is running for office in this race. We checked with Jeff. Jeff said that was not the case. And we've known Jeff for a long time, and we appreciate that he's a part of our panel this evening. But we wanted to address that up front. And now with his question, unaffiliated.
Well, yeah, I'll make a comment on that. You know, when you work in politics, and I'll tell all 8 of you, you think when you leave office you will no longer be attacked politically, but maybe that's not quite the case. Now, I'm not affiliated with any candidate here or any organization. I've had a 5-minute conversation with Mr. Bond at London County Fire Hall. Bob Farrell's a friend of our families, as is Nick Hadley's family is a friend of our family. Haven't spoken to Mr. Foote since I congratulated him on election night. I had the pleasure of meeting Mrs. Jackson at my facility one day, which she stopped by to introduce herself. And, of course, Snake and I have been friends for many years. He worked closely with the Board of Education through the Chamber of Commerce. So there's my full disclosure.
It sounds like you're affiliated with everybody.
I'm affiliated with everybody. And I haven't donated any money to any of these candidates. So.
Okay, very good. So, Jeff, go with your question.
Sure. My question. When it comes to improving school security, there's 2 popular approaches: more security officers, school security officers, and enhanced mental health programs. Can the system afford a security officer in each school? And if not, how would you come up with the funding for that?
Going first will be Terry Lynn Casey Camp this time. We're going to bounce every other one and then come back and go the other way. I didn't want to have Snake go back to back. That's all. Very good. Terry?
Well, that's a very complex question. I'm actually, my background is in mental health, so I'm an advocate for obviously both SROs and enhancing mental health services for our students, and I think that they definitely go hand in hand, and I think that we need to work with in collaboration with, as we have been doing, the local county and state law enforcement as well as community mental health agencies. So I think that we start there. When you look at the Safe to Learn Act, they are, for our area, they are suggesting that we have 7 additional SROs. And according to the budget, that will cost approximately $1.5 million. Now, I know that Mr. Farrell has another idea about that and hiring what's actually called safety and security officers, and there's a difference between that and what would be considered a SRO. So the reason why it's expensive is that you have to include obviously a salary, the training, as well as a car, which they estimate that will cost $50,000, and a variety of other things that are needed, which is why it costs that much. It is mandated by the state. I think that...
Okay, I can't let you go any further than that. That was the bell and not the red card. Nick Hadley, you get to go next.
Well, whenever we sat down this year as a board to look at the budget before we sent it over to the county, one of the things was we needed to look for more SROs, because even though an SRO may not necessarily be the be-all and end-all in a school safety, it is a thing that puts someone in there that makes the teachers and the students feel a little bit more safe. All right, and they are the first point of contact if something would happen, okay? So when we sat down to do that, they said, well, we need to go ahead and think about asking for 1 or 2 more from the county. And I said, why are we doing just 1 or 2 more? Why not ask for the full 13 more? I said, let's put it back on the county, and let's get this built into our budget. Unfortunately, when it was sent over, we weren't able to do the all 13, but we were able to get 1 extra. So we now have 9 within our school system. If you look statewide, we actually have more than what most people have or what they would consider a requirement. So we're doing very good, but I don't think that we need to stop there. I do think that we need to have an SRO in each and every school, and that's something that I've worked for and I would definitely continue to promote. And I think it comes down to kind of a hybrid between what the state is requiring and what Mr. Farrell is proposing, where we could do it probably a whole lot less than that $1.5 million. So I think that it is going to have to be a hybrid between SROs and the safety officers like we have in the schools now. So that is something that's huge and something that I definitely would support.
Wayne Foote.
I will go along with Nick. We worked very hard on talking about what we needed for safety in our schools, about the SROs. Yes, we wanted to have more. We were fortunate that the county did work with us, and we did get some help. Another thing to look at, that we have a governor, Governor Hogan, who is really out there supporting any kind of a program that's going to make it safe for our students in schools. Again, I go back to what goes on in the trenches. That's where all the action takes place, people. If you've never been a teacher in a classroom, you don't know what I'm talking about. Having been an art teacher, I heard things that a lot of things would not be heard in conventional classes. Mine was unconventional. If you have teamwork and you have teachers working together for the betterment of that school, where they feel comfortable talking with their administration, you can nip a lot of these things right in the you-know-what before they get started. So again, we go down to the dollar bill. It's all about money. We've had the railroad pull out of Cumberland, Maryland. We've lost 154 students from last school year. We've lost $1.6 million in funding coming from the state. Only if God comes down and performs a miracle to get us back on our feet in Allegany County, we are going to be going down the slippery slope each year. Thank you.
David Bond.
Well, I've said before, I feel we do need both. We need the resource officers, and we definitely need social workers or counselors. So how do we pay for that? Well, I've said before, I would like to look at the administration building. I'd like to look at do we need that space? Can we move it? Can we condense it into another space? It's really hard. Like different people have said, they looked at the budget. It's really hard to look at the budget from as a candidate perspective and discuss it with anybody. But I would like to see, what are we actually spending on that building? What's it cost? There's a lot of ways we can look at things. I had also mentioned earlier in a different forum that there is a possibility maybe we could get more teaching hours out of supervisors and some of the teacher mentors, the specialists, having them help teach some of the classes and taking some of the load off the teachers. I think that kind of look at not only the physical structures of our county, as we've said before, we want to keep all of, and the elementary schools as I see it are very important. We want to keep them all open, and we will if we're elected. But the physical buildings need to be looked at. We have to also look at our administration. Are we administration heavy? Where can we trim money? Because I was speaking to a county commissioner, and he told me just 2 weeks ago that there isn't any extra money. The county doesn't have more money to give us. So it's going to have to be where can we streamline and trim things down to provide a quality education.
All right, let's go to the other end of the table, and answering that question now will be Snake Robertson.
I agree with mostly what everybody has stated at this time. The only thing that back about 3 weeks ago, I think there was 3.5 pages in the Cumberland paper of non-paid taxes from the citizens of Allegany County that hasn't been collected. And basically, being honest, their checkbook, my checkbook, if it's money's not in there, you can't write it. Well, you're not supposed to write it anyway. So to fund some of these things, and again, I hear promises like, I don't want to close any schools, but we don't have any money. We don't have enough SROs. I think the communication that maybe has been somewhat lacking over the years with dealing with the Allegany County commissioners is, if you only talk to them every now and then and ask them for something, I don't think you get the reception that you would get if you visit them more on a more monthly basis or every couple months. I think they want to do well too in the county, but I think that sometimes a difference in personalities or whatever may cause the effect to fall back onto what we're asking for. If it takes 13 SROs, I'd be happy if they gave me 2 more than what I had last year to start with, because that is a plus. That's not a minus. And money is money. There's no two ways about it. So one thing I did want to say is promising not closing schools. I wish I could tell everybody here and everybody that's listening to this that it won't happen, but you've heard everybody say money's tight. You don't keep them open. Electric bills, gas bills, teachers. Thank you.
Carmen Jackson.
Well, we have to think out the box for every penny we can find. Not only do we need resource officers in the schools, but the school hardware, the windows, the doors, everything needs to be fixed, security systems. So it's not limited to just one issue to secure these buildings and our students. But we can always look at every aspect of the budget and make changes and make priorities and make student safety our priority. Some of the buildings, in our county could be retrofitted to be more energy efficient and find money that way. We can look at salaries. We can look at everything in that budget and make our priorities, and that's how you come up with what you need. You make priorities, and I think we can do that working together.
Okay. Deb Frank.
I'm not sure.
Wait.
Here we go. I agree with everyone here. We've all from the beginning said that in a perfect world, every school would have an SRO. Every school would have multiple mental health counselors. But knowing the fiscal situation or the budget situation that makes it challenging. I am fiscally conservative, despite what some may believe, and so I believe everything's on the table each year in terms of trying to find costs to save and so on. I know that Maryland has released, in fact, just last week or the week before, another $4 million in terms of safety assessments, and I know that much of the initial grant funding coming from the state of Maryland is about doing school assessments first and then taking a look at how to possibly add SROs on. I think, again, in a perfect world, we'd add 12 more next year, but I don't think that's going to happen. I would guess that working with the budget, we would look at maybe doing a 3 or 4 year plan where we gradually increase the number of SROs. But equally important, and you mentioned this, Mr. Metz, is the mental health component. All the research that's coming out is saying that's even more significant than having the SROs. I don't want to get rid of the SROs, but I think unless we look at the mental health services available to students, then all we do is going to be for naught, because many of these school shootings could have been identified very early on had these schools had mental health counselors available, looking at those kinds of situations. Thanks.
Bob Farrell.
Finally. This is my forte. I mean, I was involved, I was with the state police. I did school security for a number of years and set up most of the security systems in the schools. The question I think that Jeff asked is, which would you have first, the resource officers or the psychological end, and how would you pay for it? The answer to that is I'd put the resource officers in first. I think you can do the cost for that for 13, and I don't know where the other folks get their information as far as the difference between the safety officers and the resource officers and whatever. They both do the same job. They both have the same powers. They're both armed. They do programs and they stay in the schools. The car just affords them the opportunity to move and go outside the school to do something else. Personally, I want them in the schools. I don't want them moving outside the schools. There was a study done by retired Chief Bobby Dick, Vic Rushline from the FBI, John Morley, numerous people back after the Sandy Hook, and I was part of that study where we decided, and that was the best experts in the area said, this is the way to go. The cost is $30,000 per officer. 13 times 30 comes out to $390,000, and I think I can find that in the budget, going line by line and cutting down maybe on some of the travel, some of the other things that occur in the school, and I think that needs to occur first. Do we need to do the change the open space schools to harden them up a little bit? Absolutely, we need to do that.
Thank you. We're to the point of another break. We'll take about a 3-minute break here for our candidates who need to stretch a little bit or maybe walk outside and get well, we do have water on the table, so that helps out. Anyhow, we will continue with our candidate forum featuring candidates for the Allegheny County Board of Education after these messages. Okay, we're coming back. Thank you very much, and we have returned to the WCBC Allegheny Media Candidate Forum here at Allegheny College of Maryland. Thanks for joining us and becoming more informed as a voter. We thank our candidates for being here. One note, we will have 4 of these candidates elected to office this time around. Usually it's not that many, but this time around there will be an election of 4. So keep that in mind as we proceed, that you're picking 4. You're not just picking 3, or I guess you could pick 2 or 1 if you were going to use a bullet ballot. We want to go for a moment to maybe the dark place that no community wants to go. And we've seen it happen across the country. We have had incidents that have had mass casualties, maybe even a terrorist attack. If that happens in Allegheny County during your watch, how does your priority, how do those priorities change? And we'll start in the middle with Nick Hadley, and we'll kind of alternate to get out. What would happen in that situation, Nick?
Well, first of all, Paul, thank you for giving me the hard one. You know, that is something that I pray to God that never happens, especially in our area. If it does, you know, we just got to take every step, every moment at a time, and just make sure that all of our teachers and our staff and all of our students, most importantly, are taken care of. I mean, if it's a terrorist attack, I mean, that could, you know, be the entire city of Cumberland. It's hard to say what could happen there. If it's an attack on our schools, I think we just basically go in and we handle it the way any other school system has, and we just make sure that if there's an active shooter, that we get people in there right away, and that we get that, you know, guy or gal exterminated as quickly as possible and make it as safe as possible for our kids. But, you know, one way to do that, I think, is to have, you know, active shooting classes for our students, and make sure that if a tragedy happens, that they are kind of aware of what to do and where to go and how to run and how to get out of there. And, you know, I honestly don't think that a student should ever really worry about fighting someone that would ever come into their building. I think they need to worry about getting themselves out and getting safe. So I think we just play that by ear, Paul, and just pray that it never happens, but take a most proactive approach and make sure that our kids are ready if something would happen.
Okay. Deb Frank?
I don't know what any of us could add to this. It would be a horrible tragedy, obviously. All of us support increased school safety. I'm sure that if I asked individually the other 7, this is probably the issue that they've been hit with most when we've been out campaigning, is what are you going to do to make sure my kid's safe? So as much as I hate to think about what would happen if, I know that we need to be prepared for that. So I would support what Nick said and provide as much active training, active shooter training at all levels, teachers, students, the state police, the city police, the sheriff's office, doing that as often as possible. Where you run into a problem, though, is are you doing it so much that you're making children fearful in a disproportionate amount? So I think it's finding the balance of that. You know, I remember hearing my parents talking about climbing under desks for their drills in case there was a bomb dropped on their schools, and that was a frequent training session. So I don't know where the balance is there, but I think we would all agree it would be a horrible tragedy. To be as prepared as possible with as much training as possible, I think, is top priority.
Carmen Jackson, we're going to go your way next.
Well, after the fact, it's hard to do much other than respond, and respond responsibly. I would like for us to make sure we focus on preventive so that we can avoid the disaster that may be coming our way. Some disasters we can't avoid, for example, are we doing drills for our young ones and what to do? Do they understand what officers or safety security officers may be instructing us to do, so that when they're told to do something, they understand why? So, I mean, in terms of being prepared, there's a lot we can do to learn in our community. I just went to in one of the restroom doors, and it said it was a safety shelter. I think that was the word on the door. We need to identify those in the school system so that students know where to go for safety, and what's available in each classroom for safety. So it's hard to say what I would do when a lot of things have not been designated yet. But we have to prepare for every possible response that's needed. And I think education is the key, and involving local security, emergency facilities and workers. All of that has to be taken into account. So we need to start now before we have a disaster.
Wayne Foote.
God forbid if that would ever happen in Allegheny County, but all we got to do is look what's going on in the world, what's going on in our country. First of all, I think we got one of the best teams in working together, and that's law enforcement. I know they communicate very well together, being the state police, the county, the sheriff, and the city of Cumberland and Frostburg, working together as a team if something like this would ever happen. I would also go on to say, like I've been saying, awareness. Awareness what's going on in the trenches. Your teachers, your custodians, your cafeteria staff, always having their eyes open, their ears open, and making people aware of things before they happen. Again, I stress teamwork. And last but not least, getting as much training as we can to get into the schools to know what to do, teacher, students, cafeteria people, custodians, what to do if something like that happens in your school. Thank you.
Terry Lynn Casey Camp.
Obviously, we really don't want to think about whether this would happen or not, but there are a number of programs that are actually being done right now in terms of trying to train everybody involved in what to do if we had an active shooter or some type of terrorist attack. For example, one of the programs is the ALICE program, which I've actually participated in at Garrett College. We had to go through the ALICE program for the same reason, to make sure that we're adequately prepared and know how to help our students. I think the question was, though, what would you do after it happened was the big question. And I think the big answer to that is that we would have to obviously provide mental health services to those that were involved in the attack, directly involved in the attack. One of the things that we do when there is some type of attack like this is we send in crisis counselors. And they come in from all over the world, actually, to come in and try to help prevent students and teachers from experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. So that would be a big issue that we would actually have to be prepared to handle if something like that were to happen. I also was a child that participated in duck and cover. And when we think about that, obviously it was so silly that we were sitting underneath our desks. Those of you that remember those training sessions, they were not helpful.
Yeah, that wasn't going to save you, I don't think. We go to Bob Farrell.
Yes, there are, and I guess I want to go back to the beginning, and probably not the question is, that's why I want to have the resource officers in each school so that we don't ever have to face this as a community. I can't even imagine what it would be like to lose a child. And if my wife were still alive, she would tell you I spent many sleepless nights when I was doing school security trying to anticipate things and work on things. And, I'd get up at 3 in the morning and get my mind to get working. But there is emergency plans in place that say what will happen, if something like that occurs, which the way things will be done and what will occur after. Teams were set up, at least when I left the Board of Education, to go to the hospital, to go to different places in the community, using school counselors, using other folks to try to mitigate some of those things. I taught school security on a national level, and for the Performance Institute in Arlington, Virginia, where people come in from all over the country. And I think that that one of the big things is, you know, getting through that. I mean, it's pretty much the same as if you're, you know, a terrorist can be a domestic terrorist, a homegrown terrorist, or a terrorist from someplace else. And I think that what we're dealing with right now is the local, you know, we think about the homegrown terrorists that hamper our schools.
Jim Snake Robertson.
You know, I was trying to prepare an answer for that, and then I came back with, I want to put myself in position if that was my grandchildren in that school, and I sat on the Board of Education. What did I or did I not do as a member of that education to prevent this? What was I thinking? What didn't I think of? Who would have ever thought that that would have happened that way? You know, in today's world, there's so many different ways because of the use of technology and Facebook and everything else where people experiment with things, and I wouldn't, beyond the shadow of a doubt, think that that was actually going to happen. I know that we do our best with the Sheriff's Department, and, you know, we would come on board and we would do this and do that. I just don't know right at this time if there are certain steps that are completely going to do away with some of the things that these people are thinking about to try to harm other people. I just don't know if that's going to happen. You know, we do our best, but we can't control the health, the thinking of people. It seems like it must be a split second or something when something goes off in their mind to do that. I'm just being basic. I think that rocket science with trying to plan ahead on some things, not knowing where these people are coming from, is very, very hard to do. And I like the people that take the time to do the mental health and to try to school in this and that. But we're getting to a point now where we might have to get a little more visualized, or you know, where we start doing things back.
David Bond.
Well, unfortunately, we've come close. You know, we've had bomb scares and lockdowns, and with my having had kids that my last one just graduated, there were not frequent, but there were several occasions I remember getting notifications, or, you know, that the schools had some kind of, that could have been a possible, you know, problem. So we're just lucky at this point so far. So I want to see things improve, and I think there are things that we can do that aren't all that expensive. I've seen door lockers when looking this stuff up that you can easily hook up to, or so we have hook up to doors that keep the door from being open. Training is going to be important, yes, but you know, for what the children should do. I think a school resource officer could do a lot of that, much like a fire drill. Could have the kids go through what should happen if something, they hear a gunshot or whatever that's set up. That's not my specialty, but I think that's important, having some training. But beyond that, not have armed officers in the school, I think, is the biggest mistake, because the travel time for somebody to respond. What if there was one at you know, one of our up Georges Creek, and there didn't happen to be an officer in that school at the time? It could take a half hour, 40 minutes for somebody to get there. It's just because of the way our county's laid out. So we need armed people in the school to respond to those kind of problems when they happen, and then let's also use that specialist, that officer, to also teach our children how to react, what they should do and where they should go. I think that's the safe move.
Thank you. We're going to go to 60-second answers to get more questions in, if we can. And Brian Gowans is going to kick off this round, which we like to call the lightning round. Brian?
Thank you, Paul. The Board of Ed recently requested an opinion from its Ethics Commission pertaining to the potential for conflict of interest issues for board candidates. Do you see yourself or any of your fellow candidates having any such conflicts?
And we go to Deborah Frank first. That was Brian's question, don't it?
Yes, thank you, Brian. 60 seconds, it's not enough time to even touch the subject. I don't have an ethical issue, a conflict of interest. I believe it's been pretty clear that one of our candidates is currently suing the board. One has sued the board in the past. So those would be questions best suited for them. I, as a voter, would have had a lot more respect for Mr. Farrell had he been proactive and announced to everybody who did not know that he was actively suing the board, and that these are the areas in which he would have have to recuse himself. I think the fact that he got furious with this was one of those shoot the messenger, but I'll ignore the message kind of thing. So I have no conflict of interest, any ethical concerns with running for the board, but that's my take on it.
All right, Nick Hadley, you're next.
Well, I think one of the questions that was posed about my potential conflict of interest was working at CBiz, and I think that I have come out and said, you know, I have always recused myself when it has come down to a vote, anything to do with CBiz. I think that the governor who appointed me back in January, if he had a problem because he had my insurance license, if there was a problem, I don't think he would have appointed me to the position if there was a conflict. So I don't feel that I, you know, have a conflict or that I've ever posed any problems or concerns there. And as far as others, I mean, I think that I will let that up to the voters to go there. I do think a lawsuit against the school system could be considered, you know, a conflict, but I think that comes down to, you know, how the voters feel and what's actually coming out of that lawsuit. So I think that's going to be up to them how they answer that. So thank you very much.
Okay, Wayne Foote, you're next.
I basically have no conflicts of interest. I think I've shared before with these forums at one time when I came on the school board back in 2014, I did have a sign business. I did work for Fort Hill High School and Allegany High School. That's been taken care of. I no longer receive payment through the Board of Education, but through clubs. And it's an unfortunate thing when you bring things up about people from the past. It is, I guess, part of our life that we live today. I hate to see it. So I would just like to say the past is the past and the present is the present. Thank you.
Carmen Jackson.
Yes, I have no entanglements with the Board of Education, no businesses, no activities like that. But one thing that did occur to me in going through this process is I was not asked to do a security clearance. And I just wonder who in the school systems have to go through security systems. I believe that if you have access to our students, you should be identified if you have anything in your background. So that's just one thing I'd like for us to look at in the future. If you have access to our students, we need to know what your background has been. That's my opinion. The other thing about knowing about any other situations are all rumors. And so I wish that a lot of rumors have been exposed at the beginning of this process, because now we're in the, near the end, and there's more whispers about what's going on than facts.
Bob Farrell.
Paul, I am the elephant in the room. You know, the suit was started prior to my wife running for the last election where she got elected. The suit continued on, and hopefully everything was submitted to the federal court judge July 15th. We're waiting for him to rule, and it should be over. When that is over, it'll be a moot issue. The one thing that the Ethics Commission came out and said is that I can't be involved with any people that are named in the suit. 3 people named in the suit were Ben Breyer, Sherry Witt, and Dr. David Cox. Ben Breyer is now working for Frostburg State University. Sherry Witt has retired, and Dr. David Cox's contract does not come up for 2 years. So I don't see the, yes, is there a conflict as far as me working on Dr. Cox's contract? Probably is, and I would excuse myself from that. But I don't see that as being a conflict as far as anything else. Thank you.
Terry Lynn Casey Camp.
I shared the last time that we met as a forum that my sister-in-law, Adrienne Brower, is currently teaching at Parkside. And so obviously that's one of the things that have come up in terms of school consolidation is closing Parkside. However, I am a community-based school advocate, and that's the way I've always been. In terms of the conflict of interest with other candidates, personally, and this is my personal opinion, I think if you're currently suing the board or have sued the board, that disqualifies you, in my opinion. And the reason I say that is because this has been very costly for the citizens of Allegheny County. Just the most current lawsuit has cost just approximately $75,000 in legal fees. So, yeah, I'm concerned about that, and we don't know what the outcome is. So, it is costing our community.
David Bond.
So I'm going to guess I'm probably the other one that has a lawsuit, which I'm going to tell you what it is. In the last forum, Dr. Casekamp said I didn't answer the question honestly when I said I don't have a conflict. So here's my conflict. This is my lawsuit against the board. In 2000, I think it was 2000, when they remodeled Mount Savage, I came home one day. My house at the time was right beside the school parking lot. So I come home, and there was a stake through the middle of my driveway, my blacktop, right down through the middle. And I said, "What's going on?" And they said, "Well, this is going to be the edge of the parking lot." And I said, "In my driveway?" And he said, "Yes." So I contacted an attorney, Bill Trazo, and we found out you cannot sue the board. So I've never sued the board, because you can't sue the board without permission, because they didn't give permission. So we didn't sue for the county for this particular. It was a land issue. So it turns out that they were nice and didn't put the parking lot in my driveway, although the county still owns that parcel of ground. So what do I have to be mad to the county about? I don't know why they're so mad or what this comes up for. That's my issue.
Okay. And Snake Robertson?
I don't believe I have any conflicts of interest at this time. Not that I know of, anyway. In the past 18 years with dealing with those, I don't think I've had any problems. The Ethics Committee, they have a job to do. They did it. That was the results of it. As a citizen, or whatever I want to believe, there it is in black and white. I'm not here to accuse. That's why we have laws and we have rules and regulations with ethics. If you feel that you're still running because of that, that's your business. I don't have to agree with it. But as far as I'm concerned, that I don't think it's right, but that's my own personal opinion. You know, the ethics, what they came up with, what the results were. Thank you.
We have a retort from Deb Frank.
I
Deb?
just had a question for David Bond, and not recognizing a potential conflict of interest with Cigna Health Insurance. I know that you were public on video saying Cigna was a horrible, terrible mistake that the board made going with Cigna because they don't reimburse as much as the other ones did. So I'm just curious to hear your response to why you don't think that you would have a conflict of interest with the health insurance.
Okay, David?
That was also very easy. Cigna is so bad it doesn't pay for any of the services that I offer or any other chiropractor. And many of the patients that I do see who are teachers complain all the time about their insurance. So I don't have a conflict on Cigna in that I don't partake it. I don't deal with it. So there you go.
Okay. Very good. Asking our next question will be Greg Larry of the Cumberland Times-News.
Thank you, Paul. One function of the Board of Education is to hire a superintendent. Dr. David Cox is now in the midst of his third four-year contract, having served more than a decade. How would you evaluate his overall performance?
I think we'll go to Carmen Jackson first. She hasn't gone first. So, Carmen, you're up.
Well, what I have to evaluate him by is my past experiences in working with him. So that's all been positive. Positive not meaning he always agreed with me. We usually disagree. But we are able to disagree without having a problem or falling out about it. I'm the person that goes to him and complain if I think a student has not been treated fairly in the school system, and his door has always been open. I've gone to him to have diversity program presented in the school systems, and he's managed to allow that to happen. So I don't have a negative experience to espouse in my relationship with him. The person, and I can't even remember the name, who had the position before him, I had a lot of problems with. I couldn't even get in the door to talk to the person. And I just have not had that negative experience with Dr. Cox.
Let's go to David Bond next.
Well, my understanding of his salary, it would be an issue for me. I've said before, I don't understand why we have a superintendent that makes far more than our governor to run a small county, a small poor county in the state of Maryland. So that's one issue. You know, I'm sure that Dr. Cox and I have actually never had a face-to-face conversation. So I can't say that I hate the man, and I can't say that I like the man. I really don't know him, only by stuff that I've seen to happen. One of the things that I went through with my children is my children were of age through all 4 of the events at Mountain Ridge, the sex abuse events, and I was not happy at all with the way that was handled. And I still think it should be looked into. So, you know, some of the things that I've seen happen, a couple weeks ago when we had the incident at the stadium where we didn't have an ambulance present when the referee was hit and we had to wait. I think contact sports should have ambulance present at all events, not just football. Probably at soccer as well. I mean, you can get knocked out there too. So I'm sure we'd have differences, but we could probably find some common ground.
Terry Lynn Casey Camp.
I found this question a little bit difficult to answer, mainly because I have not really had direct interactions with Dr. Cox in terms of anything that has to do with the Allegheny County Public School System, as well as not having access as a candidate to his performance evaluation. So it's a little tricky to answer that question. My experience with him, though, is actually he taught a class when I was working on my doctorate for educational leadership, and I was in that class, and so I did work with him some in terms of that class. But in terms of really evaluating his performance, I really don't have access to the information to answer that question fairly. So,
all right, we go to Wayne Foote next.
I go back to when I got on the school board, knowing a lot of the principals, a lot of the teachers. I can remember a principal saying to me, "Wayne, I'm not supposed to talk to you." Now, what is that all about? I mean, it's called, you've heard me say this again, communications and teamwork. Teachers have also come to me and said, you know, Wayne, I'm just afraid to talk to you because if the word gets back to the Hill, I might be transferred to another school. Mrs. Farrell and I were probably the 2 people who engaged in having a survey done through our certified and non-certified personnel. We wanted it done kind of like a ballot, but it was done over the internet. So a lot of teachers probably were afraid to really speak out because you know that can be traced. But we had 71% return saying morale and communication were 2 top problems.
Jim Robertson.
I was actually fortunate to sit on that committee for the selection of the superintendent of schools when that happened. And when he became the superintendent of schools, I had many dealings with him over the past years. I have yet to say something derogatory about Dr. Cox in regards to the programs at the Career Center, the apprenticeship programs, the focus on the future, the Teacher of the Year, the ACES program. It just goes on and on and on of the things that we've been able to accomplish and keep for the kids. Personally, I don't have a thing against Dr. Cox, okay? I think he's doing his job from my aspect of it the way it should be done. I'm not going to nitpick about this, that, or whatever, because I do think at heart he has the students at heart. Now, as far as his salary and stuff goes, that was negotiated by a committee, which was the existing Board of Education. I can't sit here and tell you they were wrong or they were right. They negotiated this contract that was agreed to, and he deserves to get what he's being paid now.
Deb Frank.
Thank you very much. I've had some dealings with Dr. Cox, just connecting the college to the school system, and they've all been positive. He's been really supportive of anything that I've asked or or requested. Now, in terms of how to evaluate him, I would have to take a look at the instrument that the board currently uses to see if that needs tweaked. I mean, things that I evaluate my administrators here on, I guess would be similar in evaluating his performance, and they would include things like accessibility and openness and support of staff and policy follow-through and things like that. So for those of us who've never been on the board, that's a difficult question to answer. I would like to respond to the salary issue, though, because Dr. Bond brought that up at one of the other forums, and gives you half the story. He'll say he makes more than the governor of Maryland. Well, so do 23 of the 24 superintendents. So your statement implies it's just Allegheny County that has created this enormous salary is not true. Also recognize the fact that we're one of the few school systems in the state of Maryland that don't have an assistant superintendent or a deputy superintendent. So I think that needs to play into the salary.
Okay. Bob Farrell?
Let me first say I have nothing personal against Dr. Cox, has been alluded to. The lawsuit's gone on since 3-4 years ago when my wife was alive. So that, to me, not blends into this. I do look at the communication end, where board members have to go through the superintendent to go into schools or do whatever. And I've talked to teachers, and teachers tell me that, as Wayne said, their communication is stifled, and I am not for stifling communication in any way, shape, or form. I do look at this year, and Dr. Cox, after the first year, went to South America. Then he went to China and I think Tennessee, all in a matter of 3 or 4 months. If he's doing all this traveling, then how is he running the school system? I think that some of those things need to be looked at, and the overall picture of, are the teachers happy? Are things going as they should go?
And Nick Hadley.
Well, I have had the pleasure to deal with David Cox for almost 5 years now, and we don't always get along. We don't always have the same thought process and the same overall answer to everything, but, he is someone that will sit down and we can have a dialogue and we can communicate just fine. As far as this not being able to talk to teachers or staff or anything like that, I have never had a problem with Dr. Cox on that. I communicate regularly with teachers and staff for that anytime I want. Now, if I was to go into a school, I would want to let somebody know that I'm coming, just so I don't show up unannounced and be a nuisance or, be an interruption. All right, so if that's something that's being asked of me, I think that's fine. But David Cox actually works very hard, I think, for the students. He's doing the best that he possibly can for the students. He's not perfect by any standards, and I do believe there's some things that probably need to be reined in, maybe, pulled back. But I think overall he does a very good job for the school system, and he's doing the best that he can. Thank you.
Our next question coming from First United Bank's Kathy Getty. Oh, sorry. Terry Lynn Casey Camp has a 30-second rebuttal.
There's just some inaccurate information that has been provided here. First of all, in terms of the survey that was done with the staff and faculty, I actually read that survey, and actually more than 70% of the people that answered that, of the staff and faculty, believe that they have a good working relationship with the leadership. 73% said that morale was their own personal responsibility, and the issue about communication was that they wanted to be more informed about how decisions are made. So that's actually what the survey said.
Okay. Anybody else? Very good.
As a number of you have alluded to, a consultant's report this year recommended closing 2 elementary schools. Would you follow through on the recommendation? And if not, how would you propose redistricting to be handled?
And we'll start with Nick Hadley this time around.
Well, first thing is we need to realize that this was just a study. This was to get some information about what are some proposed things that we could do to make our county a little bit better off financially, to see what we can do. When they came up with the closure idea of Parkside and Georges Creek, I don't think that was the true intent of what was wanting to be done by that study. I think whenever we all looked at it, and this was done before I was on the board for the redistricting, I think that I would go along with the fact of saying, hey, this school is overcrowded. We need to move some of those kids to another school. To me, that's redistricting. But when you look at closing the schools, that is not something that anybody here, I would think, would want to do. And I know, for one, Georges Creek was where I grew up, where I went to school. I would hate to see anything happen to that school. And Parkside is a great community school. I would hate to see anything happen to that as well. So my opinion is to keep both of those schools open, because there's not enough information at this point in time to show that they need to be closed. Thank you.
Bob Farrell.
I've said from the very beginning, I will not close any elementary schools. Let me repeat, I will not close any elementary schools. As far as Parkside is concerned, it is a very structured, normally structured classroom facility. One of the things that they talked about was moving those students to Cache Valley, which is an open space school, which, number two, I'm not sure is good for the instruction, but number two on that, this is a very large security concern for me. The board spent $25,000 getting this study done and then backed completely away from it whenever this came about. I guess I feel like it's awful easy to spend $20,000 or $25,000 when it's not your money and then say, oh no, that isn't what we really wanted, or that isn't really what we said. I'm for community schools. I believe the schools are supported by the community. We just put money into track at Parkside, and we're doing it for other schools, so I don't want to do it.
Deb Frank.
I share the concerns that everybody else does at the table about potential closures of schools and I do not support that. I attended the Blue Ribbon Commission presentation with the consultants, the initial report, and then some follow-up ones. And I believe that even the members of the existing school board were a bit surprised that it went in that direction. They believed that it was going to be a redistricting study, saying moving these students over to this less crowded school, when in fact the consultant came up with closures. So just walking in the community, spending a lot of time with Parkside parents, Georges Creek parents, we've got to weigh the advantage of having a centerpiece of a school in a community against possibly closing and moving people out. Quite frankly, LaVale seems to be a growth area in this county, and it would make absolutely no sense to remove that centerpiece elementary school. And with Georges Creek, maybe it is a matter of moving some children around, but school closures, I think, would be disastrous for the community. Schools are much more than schools. They're community centers.
Jim Snake Robertson.
I agree. I remember, just to give you an example, in my hometown, I went to a private school and then went to LaSalle, and it's gone. And I think that when we went to Bishop Walsh, and I think that for the most part, the parents were more concerned about it than it was the children. And the reason I relate back to this, I want everybody to remember that when Mountain Ridge was going to go, and how bad they thought everything was going to be, and this and that and whatever. And if I recall rightly, after that school would open, included the students from Mount Savage, Lonacone, and up at Frostburg, I think the students got along very, very well. And I think they've came a long way with their sports and academics. But I think it was the parents that were the problem. I don't want to see any schools in localities closed, but until you want to take it independently, that you're going to start paying for the lack of the funds. Like we'll send you a monthly bill for electric, or we'll send you a monthly bill for this and that. You can only pay, and I repeat, you can only pay the bills if you have the money. I cannot sit here and promise that.
Wayne Foote.
No, excuse me. No, I do not want to see schools close. I graduated from Valley High School. How do you think I felt back in those days when they said Valley and Bruce were going to be consolidated into one school? It was a very bitter pill to swallow. It took time to heal that. Then the next thing was, okay, we take and we consolidate from McCool all the way up the creek and down into Mount Savage, and we created Mountain Ridge. I've said in these forums before, I went back into the classroom as a substitute. I wanted to make sure that I did some subbing at Mountain Ridge. I was very impressed on what I saw and how the students got along. It took a while for those communities to come together because they hated one another. I had some soccer games with Bell and Bruce and Mount Savage that we had to shut the lights off. So money, employment will dictate to what we do and putting it out to a vote for the county to vote on.
Terry Lynn Casey Camp.
I have thoroughly reviewed the FEA study, and there are definitely limitations to the study. And basically, there's a lot of quantitative data, but there's not qualitative data that actually addresses the direct impact on the communities that this will have an effect on. The other issue, I think, is that it's short-sighted to start closing schools when there's bipartisan support to increase funding for early child education programs and after-school programs. We only have 4 elementary after-school programs, 2 Judy centers, and 2 child care centers in our community. So we have to be basically ready for this bipartisan support that Governor Hogan and the Kerwin Commission are actually working out the funding for this so that we'll be ready for alternative uses of the space. And the last thing I want to say is that community-based schools are important to the vitality of our economic growth.
David Bond.
Well, I was also at the meeting where they revealed, it was kind of a very, very brief overview of the study. But one of the things I took away is how much was mentioned about physical building costs. Replacement of, they had estimates of windows that are going to be needed to be replaced, roofs. Well, we got a roof that's leaking now, but well, I guess it's fixed. Hopefully it's fixed. Anyway, there's a lot of physical costs as well in this. And so I don't want to close a school. And I've, as Snake has said, you know, he won't promise, but that's like last option for me to close an elementary school. We have to pretty much lost everything else first. And I don't think that's going to happen. So the physical costs are there. We've got this closure issue. I'm not for closing the schools. And then the last thing is on, well, what are we going to do about the balance? Well, we probably are going to need to, you know, kind of distribute the students or redistrict, if you want to call it that, into other buildings without going so far as to force little kids to spend, you know, long periods of time on a bus. I don't want to see that.
Carmen Jackson.
Well, I prefer not to close any of the schools, but we have to get all the facts included in what we do. When we close a school in any community, we impact the income of that community. We affect the tax basis of that community. We take the salaries of all the teachers, custodians, the principals, every facet of the school. That income comes out of that community. And then the community becomes a poor community, and the tax base goes down. So there's a lot we have to look at, and we have to look at it together as a community. A lot of events need to happen in our schools as opposed to closing our schools. We have kids that are hanging out when they don't have anything to do because we are closing everything. We have a problem with students who are bused to a school when they have evening activities. Who gets them back to those activities? They get to fall by the wayside if their parents don't have a car to take them to everything. So we damage a lot of our kids in a lot of ways.
Thank you. With our next question will be Jeff Metz. Jeff?
I'm going to go off script a little bit here. So it's from all the time I've done working with WCBC, and Dave Adelot's taught me that. So my question is, there's a fair level of animosity here this evening. I was a elected school board member. You have to work with 4 other individuals when you're on the school board. Can you work with each other if elected? And conversely, is there anyone you can't work with?
We will start with David Bond and go down the line, and then I think I've done every other composition I could on the
Okay, so everybody said thanks for having a question, but come on, that's the worst question of the night to get asked. Thanks. I can see you're on our alliance.
Okay.
You really helped us out on that one, Jeff.
Dave, before you go on there, I want to bring people up to date. We do have a special report here that there has been a vehicle accident on William Street in Cumberland. There's a vehicle into a residence there, and the building collapse team has been alerted. So we're bringing you up to date on a live special report here. If you're listening to this in November, disregard it. It has been taken care of. But there is a vehicle accident, William Street in Cumberland, a vehicle into the residence, and the collapse team has been alerted. Now, I've given you time to collect some thoughts there, and you can kick us off, David.
Actually, I was just thinking, I just hope everybody's all right on that. So let me say that first. As to working with other people, well, I mean, like I said, I didn't know these guys. Well, I did know Wayne. I didn't know Bob. But, you know, I can work with them, and I can work with somebody else. But as I said, I know how these guys think, just like, you know, how somebody else is going to vote along their thoughts. When people say they don't have a viewpoint or a set view, do you have a viewpoint, you the listener? Because I'm sure you do. Your view is one way or the other, and everybody out there has a view. The question is, how can you take that view and blend it into coming up with a problem solution? And I think I'm good at that. I've done it for a long time, and I've had multiple businesses. Some were very good, some were not so good, but I've never hesitated to try. So put me with whoever you want, but as I've said before, it just depends on the direction you want to go. And I trust the voters of Allegheny County to make the decision they want. I will still go to work on November 7th one way or the other, so thanks.
Bob Farrell.
I guess I came from the state police where we dealt with, we were trained to diffuse conflict. My wife, Laura Lee, was, instructor for conflict resolution. So I've kind of been inundated with that. And I have known Snake Robertson since we were 6 years old. I've known Carmen. She was my neighbor for a while. I didn't know Deb. I've known Nick for a while. There isn't anybody that I can't work with or won't work with. The object here is to make things better for the school system, the community, and most importantly, the kids. So I'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. I've said I want to make the schools safer. That is my ultimate goal, to make the schools safer for the kids and safer for the employees. And that's what I am going to try to do.
Wayne Foote.
For the last 4 years, I've worked with the school board. It's kind of been an uphill battle, but I've always tried to be a team player. Yes, I am going to speak up when I think something is not right. That's what we have in this country, freedom of speech to do that. You know, if I have a teaching career of 42 years, and I've taught in 3 schools, one in PG County, actually 3 here in the county, being Valley, Fort Hill, and the Career Center. And I think that I have proven to a lot of people with that kind of a track record that, yes, I can work with anyone. And if you take my relationship with students that I've taught at Fort Hill and Valley, getting invited to numerous class reunions, that they thought a lot about me, that they could talk to me, and that we were a team. Thank you.
Deb Frank.
In my career here for 30 years in post-secondary education and previous positions, I feel like one of my strengths has always been my ability to sort of create teams and shared visions and so on. I'm worried about what I hear to the right, because since February, it's been a lot of negative campaigning. So while tonight they say, oh, yeah, we could work with anybody, I don't see proof of that. I think assumptions are being made. I think statements are being attributed to people that aren't true. Of course, if I make it to the board and one or more of these gentlemen do, I will do what I can, because the mission is the education of our students. But it's very disingenuous to me, and I think the voters probably sense that. If you've watched the videos that have been put out and all of the negative campaigning, I find it very hard to believe that, yeah, so sure, I'll work with everybody. That's not how to build a team from the first day.
Nick Hadley.
Well, I've been on a different combination of many different school boards at this point after being there 5 years, and we've got along very well. It doesn't necessarily mean, like I've said before, that you're going to have the same opinion and you're going to definitely get along with everything. But, I think there is not one person up here that I would, have a problem working with, dealing with. And I think that there's a few more that we would do a little better with, and there's others that may be a roadblock, especially if there's a threesome that is a roadblock that's voting one way. But, when it comes down to it, it comes down to what's best for the students. And I'm going to be that person that says, you know what, let's reel it in, and we need to focus on the students, okay? And that's what I have done since I've been there. And it doesn't matter if it's David Bond, Carmen Jackson, or anyone else up here. I'm going to work with that individual and the group of the board, because we're a united group board that has to decide what's best for those students. And that's exactly how I would handle it. We would be a team regardless. Thank you.
Carmen Jackson.
Yes, I've had the privilege of working with David Bond, and I'm not aware of any conflict from that working relationship. And I've had the privilege of being a neighbor of Farrell, and I'm not aware of any problems in that relationship. I can work with anyone up here, but I think it would not work well if everyone, just a group that want to vote together that are conservative and have a pre-drawn conclusion of what they want to do. And I just think that would not help with any other situation, because if those three vote as a block, the other two are shut out. So there's no individual up here I can't work with, but to work with just one group that has a determination that I can't get through to, that would be a concern.
Terry Lynn Casey Camp.
Obviously, I think we all agree that decision-making in terms of what's in best interest of our community, and in particular our children and our teachers and staff, would definitely have to be a collaborative effort. And we would need to work together, no matter who ends up on the board, to generate innovative ideas and solutions to complex problems. So I would hope that we would all be mature enough to be able to move past what animosity there might be presently. I do want to just speak to Dr. Bond calling the rest of us alliance haters in the last forum. Hate's a really strong word. And I personally do not hate anybody, and I really believe that I have the skill set and the temperament to get along with everybody. But I am a person that's going to confront misinformation. I mean, I think we have a responsibility as members of the board to make sure that the community is getting accurate information.
Snake Robertson.
I've worked with, many on this, people sitting right here. I've had the availability to work with the Department of Labor in those places where you sit with people you don't know, but the common goal is to have a solution-based committee. I think I'm a solution-based guy. For 18 years, I've had been fortunate to work with the Allegheny County Public School System, dealing with a lot of people that sit up here. And I'm proud of that, very proud of that. And it's the voters that's going to make or break. It's not me to tell you that I won't work with this one or I will work with that one. If I'm elected to the school board, I'll work with the people that's on the school board. And if you ask people, you'll get that from them. I'm not always right. I'm not always wrong. But the key to success is solution-based. So when you cast a vote, make sure that you take all this into consideration, because after it's over, it's over.
Thank you. We're going to take a time out. We're going to extend our forum a little bit tonight, take a couple more questions from our panel, and we have some one-on-one questions we're going to get to next here on 1270 AM and 103.1 FM and WCBCRadio.com. We'll be back after this. Mike, if you're listening, give me 3 more minutes. 3 more minutes in this break. 3 more minutes. Okay, back at the station, our candidates have returned. Welcome back to our forum featuring the Allegheny County Board of Education candidates. Our next segment here will feature one-on-one questions. I think earlier candidate Farrell mentioned the elephant in the room. We're going to try to get to some of those elephants in the room, and we'll start at the right side of the table this time. And Snake Robertson. Snake, as a union representative, are you able to represent all sides of issues due to your union background? I guess what they're trying to get at with that one is that in employee negotiations, are you going to take sides on for who?
I'm not going to take sides. I think under a collective bargaining agreement, it's on both sides. I'm able to sit there and decipher when people go, whether you're talking about fringe benefits or you're talking about wages, you're talking about health and welfare. The best thing about collective bargaining agreement, we slight nobody. If we're negotiating and we're negotiating for teachers and they get the raise, they all get the same raise. They all get the same health and benefits. So it's not that I cannot do that. I've said for years, not the past 14 years, but before that, I settled on negotiations with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers and the contractors in this area. And you could just be honest. We're going to go there. We got what? Are we going to ask for $1, hoping we get 50? Are we going to ask for 50 and they give us $1? You have to remember one thing. Unions' purpose is for the betterment of the community and the education and to keep people from being on subsidies.
Okay, Terry Casey Camp, you're next. This morning we had a call on the Dave Norman show from a guy named Ed Taylor, and he said that you were a left-winger. Do you agree? Do you disagree? How about your comment on that?
A left-winger, I'm not exactly sure what that really means, quite frankly.
I think he would say you were very liberal in your interpretation of what should be done.
Well, my background is in mental health, and I actually come from a very difficult background, which included living in a group home until I was 17 and graduated from high school. So I would say that, and I truly attribute my success to my teachers that recognized my potential, helped me develop the skills to develop that potential, and basically inspired a lifelong love of learning. Given that that is my background and mental health is my background, master's in counseling, specialized in working with children and adolescents for more than 7.5 years, teaching psychology, I would say that I come from a background of being compassionate, and I believe in social justice. So what I say when people call me a bleeding heart is I'm very proud that my heart bleeds.
Our next question will go to Carmen Jackson. You have a long background as an educator. Are you too immersed in being an educator to be an effective administrator of educators?
Well, I've spent most of my life as an administrator. On Frostburg State University campus, I came there as Assistant Director of Residence Life, which included 11 buildings, about 60 resident assistants, about a total of 100 staff members. So it was very administrative. Same as I was promoted to Director of Residence Life, and again administrative. And then I became the Assistant to the Vice President of Student Educational Services, Dr. Alice Manicure, and that was also administrative. So I've been immersed in administration. As far as my heart, I've been immersed as always fighting for equal opportunity, meaning I think every person in every situation should be treated fairly and equal. Because in my background, I came from a poor community in Chicago, and we always had to fight for being treated fair and equal.
Thank you. Nick Hadley. Nick, you said you've been on a number of boards of education. You're closely associated, fairly or unfairly, with two retiring members of the board right now. if elected, will they have influence with you on your decisions in the future?
I don't know if they've necessarily had any influence on my decisions now. I have always been an independent thinker, and I don't think anybody that's on that board has influenced me at all, and I can't imagine down the road. You know, I served with Mike Llewellyn at one point, and other than just saying hi in the neighborhood, we've not really talked about politics at all either. So no, I don't think that there's going to be anything that comes back to influence me at all, because it's all about what is best for the school system right now, not what was or not what someone else is going to tell me that it's going to be about. It's all about what Nicholas Hadley thinks is best and what I'm going to do.
Thank you. Deb Frank, you are next. You are involved in the administration here at Allegheny College of Maryland. Will that position influence you on how you serve on the Allegheny County Board of Education? Are you going to be, maybe I would say, an undue advocate for ACM?
No, absolutely not. In fact, my role, I straddle administration and faculty, so the bulk of my day is actually spent teaching. So I have gotten the end product of the public school system for the last 30 years, not just Allegheny County. I have students from all over the country. So if anything, I think that will help me look at the possibilities of increased partnerships between the post-secondary and secondary schools in particular. We've always been active members in the community with the school system. We'll be working with a Focus on the Future program in November for 7th graders. We routinely host students from 10th, 11th, and 12th grade who have little idea of what career direction they want to direct themselves to. So we do that a lot. I think if anything, it's a plus for the county system.
Okay. Wayne Foote, there have been allegations of misconduct, both physically and verbally, leveled against you. How do you respond to those allegations?
Well, I begin to feel like Mr. Kavanaugh down in D.C. when he got all the questions from the past, from yearbooks, everything. Everything is hearsay. Everyone makes something out of nothing. If these things were to have been true, why wasn't something done? My record speaks for itself in dealing with people through church, lay minister, Sunday school teacher, teaching here at the college, teaching in the high schools, being on the Republican Central Committee. I've never had any problems like this. And people know me in Allegheny County. So it's all talk, just like what happened down in D.C. Thank you.
Bob Farrell, I think we're going to go back to the Board of Education Ethics Board ruling. Do you feel that you were fairly or unfairly targeted by that ruling?
I think that the Board of Education, like I said, should not interject itself into politics. I think that they should have run it by the state superintendent, the state Board of Ethics, someone else before they ventured down that path. I don't understand why they wanted to interject themselves into this election except to say that they want to keep the status quo. Was I targeted? I think probably there's a possibility that some of those folks on there really don't want to see me on the board. My question then is why? What have I said or done or whatever other than the suit, which specifically named individuals, Dr. Cox, Ben Breyer, Sherry Witt, and two of them are no longer with us. Why did they feel the need? I'm a private citizen. I'm not a member of the board. I have not been elected, and I'm not subject to that ruling, so why did they feel the need to go down that path?
David Bond, there is in your past a bankruptcy, and I would like to give you, since you are running on partially your business background, an opportunity to explain what happened in that bankruptcy.
So that's a real easy one, and it's true. I did have a bankruptcy. I've been in business 30 years. So it was about, I'm going to say about 2004. I'd have to look up to see what that was. That's why I kind of snickered when you said it. I didn't even know it was even still on record. So anyway, at the time I had a medical doctor from Bolivia who worked for me, and I had another doctor from, I think it was Peru at the time. So I had two foreign medical doctors who worked for me in a company that we called Integrated Medical Services, but which I owned. So I was the director. We had 42 employees. So we had diagnostic ultrasound, we had DEXA scanners, we had vascular ultrasound, we had CT scanners, and somebody that might have a clue as to what they cost, even though it's not our alliance, we're talking a lot of money. So we had all that money in this equipment, and I tried to negotiate to get out of it when both of my medical directors left the country, and I could no longer order the tests that we had the equipment for. So yes, I had a bankruptcy because I didn't have the nearly $1 million of funds to pay those off. So the companies came and took the equipment back, and we settled for minimum amounts. So that's what happened.
Thank you. With probably our final question will be Brian Gowans from WCBC.
Okay, thank you, Paul. When I was young, there's always been a rumor in this area. The perception is that you can't fire a teacher. It's very difficult for a teacher to be fired. We've all had great teachers, and we've had less than ideal teachers. Are you satisfied with the current teacher evaluation system, that it's adequate?
And we'll start with Bob Farrell.
Yes, I've worked with the teachers in this system. I know a lot of the teachers in this system. I have been evaluated as a teacher in this system. So I can say I think the system does do a very, very good job checking on, doing the evaluation, evaluating how they operate. I was an evaluator for the state police, so I did evaluate other troopers and how they worked. I know how those things are supposed to operate, and I think that the system does do a good job. We have excellent teachers in this county who I think put their all. I mean, some of these elementary teachers work very long hours into the night to try to get things for our kids and to make things better, and I think they do a phenomenal job.
Deb Frank.
I didn't know you were doing the skipping thing again, Paul. I don't know what the instrument looks like for the teachers, just like I don't know what the instrument looks like to evaluate the superintendent. As a teacher myself, I am evaluated by my students. Obviously there's got to be accountability, and what my students assess my score, if you want to call it that, on is how connected I am with them, how I can inspire them to learn, to be engaged, to achieve. So, I don't know the answer to that question because I don't know what the county evaluation system is like. I disagree that it's, because I've heard that my whole life as a teacher, that, oh, you can never fire a teacher. Yes, you can. You just don't renew their contract, and that happens. So I would enthusiastically support any kind of evaluation instrument, but it's got to be designed by both students, faculty, and administrators, or all three levels. I think it's sometimes assessment is viewed as a punitive thing from the teacher's perspective if it's entirely administratively created.
Carmen Jackson.
Well, I believe that evaluations are very important. I am not familiar with the instrument that's used presently, but I'm sure it's a very fair process. But I think that something is missing, because why do we have these situations with teachers dating students, people going in the building without permission, all kinds of things going on? And so all of that needs to be taken into account before contracts are renewed. So to read in the newspaper that someone has been working at the school for several years and some of these behaviors are going on, then there's something missing in our evaluation. And that's why I said earlier, we should have background checks. We need to know what's going on with people when they have access to our kids.
Snake Robertson.
When you say evaluations, you talking about their instruction in school, or?
Just it was more about their performance, how they're evaluated, and routinely whether or not, what type of job they're doing on a regular basis.
Okay. I think a lot of that has to be done with an instrument that is fair to everybody. I think that the principal plays a big role in scrutinizing, if that's the right word, the teachers in their facility. I think the guidance counselor probably plays a big role in that, because they hear from the students, if they have a problem with a certain teacher. Also, if the teachers are under a collective bargaining agreement, I'm sure they have a procedure that they go by, that if there is a problem, that it is referred to XYZ. You get a statement from that and that. I know in the state of Maryland, it used to be you can fire anybody you want without any repercussions, so to speak. The law may have changed since then, but it is you had to have dual cause for doing that. But I just hope that we don't get to getting the teachers to the point that if you don't pass X amount of students, you're not considered a good teacher, because I don't think that's the case. I think that then it has the student become very lax in some of his studies.
David Bond.
Well, first I want to say I think we do have a lot of excellent teachers in this county. And the problem is going to be adding, as we have retirements and bringing in new teachers. So I don't know about they're talking about the way whatever instrument is used to measure. I don't know what that is, and I haven't seen it. But I have talked to a lot of teachers, and they tell me that new teachers are typically, it's such a big job to jump out of college, and then you have control of a classroom, and 24 to 30 minds you have to keep in one direction. So I would like to see, if it's possible, I'd like to form like committees that have an input on the other teachers. So the teachers in a school can be a committee, and then they have an input on the evaluation as well. How good is this new teacher? Do they need more help? If they need more help, then let's get teacher mentors, more of a one-on-one to help a new teacher along. And there's also teacher burnout. Maybe teachers need to have a way to kind of to break off for a while, kind of recharge. That needs to be looked at, and maybe that's a time to make them a mentor. So,
Wayne Foote.
Sitting here thinking back over my 42 years of teaching, Harry Mandel, which I worshipped, was my art supervisor. That was back in the 70s. He was the last one to evaluate me with an art background. I got to bring up a name of Mike Calhoun, vice principal up at Fort Hill. You always knew when you were going to get evaluated, so you always put on your best shoes, your best tie, etc. It was never a walk-in to see what really goes on in your classroom. So yeah, I knew Mike was coming, so he came in and evaluated me. Of course, in my classes, they knew who the boss was. Discipline was number one in my classroom. Once they understood that, we had no problems in learning. After the class was over, Mike come up to me and said, "Wayne, I know nothing about art, but in the last 60 minutes or so, whatever the class length was," he says, "I've learned so much. You are a model teacher." That was a compliment. Thank you.
Nick Hadley. One of these days we're going to get this Mike baton thing down.
It'll be time for us to leave. Anyway, we have wonderful teachers in the system right now, and I think right now we do have a great way of evaluating them. The only thing that I would like to see a little bit more is that the teachers actually get involved in the tool that they are using, because who better to evaluate someone than yourselves? You know exactly what you should be expecting, and whatever needs to be done. So I think the teachers need to have a little bit more input, and I also think that we need to get away from criticizing our teachers on test scores. Test scores do not tell how good the teacher is at all. The teacher is a great teacher because they can teach to that test, but their test scores for these kids don't matter at all. So I think right now we have great teachers that have adapted over several different years with different park testing and different things. I think they've done a great job. I think that they, definitely get evaluated well. I don't think that there's anything that really needs to be changed other than they maybe have a little bit more input.
Terry Lynn Casey-Camp.
I think one of the issues that you're actually talking about is tenure and what you do in terms of handling an issue where the teacher is having problems when they have tenure. I think that when we think about teacher evaluations, that we really need to think of them as an instrument to help improve teaching and learning. And I agree with Nick that the teacher should be involved and actually have a part in terms of what we call self-evaluation. I think that we need to get feedback from students. I think observing teaching is an important piece of that. And I agree with everyone that the majority of the ACPS teachers here are incredible, engaged, committed teachers. And I also don't know anything about the specific evaluation that you're inquiring about.
Thank you. And thank all of you. You have committed your time to educating our electorate. You have taken your time to possibly serve for the next 4 years on the Allegheny County Board of Education. We appreciate just that sentiment, that you have that in your heart to give, each one of you. So thanks for coming out tonight. I'd like to thank our panel, Brian Gowans, Greg Larry, Kathy Getty, and Jeff Metz, who gave time here this evening as well. And we look forward to our next candidate forum, which will be coming up on Wednesday night, featuring the Cumberland City Council and then for Mayor of Cumberland. For all of us at WCBC, thank you for listening and enjoy your evening.